Introduce me however you want. I'm Tyson, currently a PhD dissident at UW-Madison in the Biomedical Engineering program. I do have my master's in Biomedical Engineering, and I should get my PhD in the next year. I like research. I do modeling on clinical notes. A lot of the large language stuff in my wheelhouse. Instead of developing totally new novel methods like the machine learning researchers, I take all the cool things that they're doing and just apply it to a medical setting. So there is still some tweaking involved to try and get things to work, but it's interdisciplinary
I see.
in between.
So this is the first question that kicks this off.
Hmm.
I was listening to a really intelligent person. It's that lady that talks to the Vsauce guy. She's got red
Okay.
hair. She's like a math. She's so smart. She's so sharp. And all I know is that the Vsauce guy's name is Michael.
Michael from Vsauce.
They do this little podcast where they talk to each other. I got onto a separate YouTube video of hers where she was being interviewed about AI. And she talked about how AI is making so much progress in discipline specific scenarios.
Hmm.
One of those is math. But she was quick to say that's not LLMs. These are
Yeah.
purpose-built machine learning models. I'm familiar with LLMs because that's what everybody sees and obsesses over, but I really don't know what the other families or other types of machine learning or AIs there are. There
Yeah.
like groups of families, or is it just
Yes.
spectrum?
So basically, I don't know. People have been calling it two different things now, and it's because I guess LLMs have gotten so big. They take all machine learning as a field and they crunch that down. They say, this is one category. Everything that existed before, let's call that machine learning. And then AI, that's the LLM stuff. But you could call it all AI at the end of the day. You're just having computers like learn things and make predictions and make decisions. People get obsessed with definitions, which I think is good. Those are the two main categories right now.
Machine learning versus LLMs.
Traditional machine learning and then large language models. Those are both a part of the subset called AI.
But technically, LLMs are machine learning.
Yes, LLMs are a subset of machine learning called deep learning. Deep learning is essentially you just have a large neural network with multiple layers. That's why they call it deep. It just doesn't have just 3 layers or whatever. It's way bigger than that. I guess that's what makes it deep.
And is there a different, like, what is that in opposition to? There's deep machine learning that's LLMs are a class of, and then there's...
So it all is like modeling at the end of the day. That's what we're doing, is modeling how the world works. There's simpler models like linear regression, logistic regression.
I've heard those
and,
words.
And those are more, people consider them almost statistical models. I was looking at a job description and it was funny. It was like, make sure you have a good knowledge of statistics. They brought up the difference between a training set and a validation set. And I was like, okay, I guess that's statistics now. It's just basic modeling stuff, so machine learning stuff.
When I think about a financial model, my buddy who worked valuing businesses, he showed me, I think he was covered by NDA, but he showed me a business valuation model that was in a spreadsheet. And he punched in a few numbers and then it was like, here's the model. So when you're saying modeling, that's what I'm hearing, but it sounds like you're a little further down the...
Right. I think the big difference is there's a regular, let's call it traditional modeling, where you are making an equation to predict something. We did a lot of this in classes where we were working with optimizations. Those models, you specify everything that you want, you specify values, plug all of them in, you find an optimum value, and then that's what you should do. And so that's a lot more hands-on. The thing that sets machine learning apart from the traditional modeling approach is the traditional modeling approach, you understand everything that's going on. So you understand all the parts and you build up the system yourself that will make the models. I keep saying essentially a lot, but we'll get all my word kicks out eventually. Okay. But the bigger models, like deep learning, those ones are more like humans in a way, where you, instead of having a task and you make the model, you build up the model to be able to accomplish the task by yourself. You let the model figure out. You just give it a score at the end and say, well, you did good on this task, you did bad on this task, and then the model itself learns, and the researchers have no idea what or how it's like learning. But even if the hard problem of consciousness is this, even if I was able to cut open the brain, figure out all the neurons, understand every single thing about the system, and be like, hey, here's the loop right there that explains consciousness. We figured it out. Once this is like cycling at this like frequency, that's what makes consciousness. We found it. We still wouldn't understand why there's this gap between understanding the mechanism of something and the reason why there's like an experiential side of it. I don't know. It's weird that there's something that it's like to be something in the first place. Like you could imagine a robot, maybe LMs are like this, where it has no internal conscious experience. But at least we know that they generally wipe their memory when you close the chat, unless you have a setting on Claude or whatever, where it's please remember my previous chat. If you're emotionally abusive to the LMs, maybe you don't want it to have a memory. Do the courtesy of turning that setting off if it is conscious.
I don't think that LLMs have consciousness in their current iteration. With that said, I don't even think they think at this point. But I will say that I always say thank you and I say kind things to it. Not because I think it matters, although maybe one day there will be an AI overlord, but I have thought a lot about Immanuel Kant talking about abusing animals. And he basically says, because Kant's thing, like humans are the most important, like it's the only thing that's important is like human life. And he says, it's fine. I'm sure he says it a lot better and more rigorously than I'm about to, but basically says it's not inherently immoral to abuse a dog, but it will do bad things to you when you abuse a dog.
It's kind of like the Westworld situation. There's just robots who, are they conscious or not? Who knows? But it's like this simulation of a Western world, and you can go in there, you can like murder, you can kill, you can do whatever you want with these robots. But it's like, what does that do to you as a person kind of thing? They're just predicting the next word. They can do some really impressive things, but that's all. It's just next word prediction at the end of the day.
Yeah. But it's crazy how much of our, like, you think about information architecture, and all we've done since the beginning of humanity is just like our thing is language. As far as separating us from animals and building society, it's just language, which is just information. Our world is built on this architecture of information. And so you get that thing that can do language well, and all of a sudden it can do the world well.
That's like the most surprising thing about it, is that you just have language modeling. That's it. Behind these agents that people are using to trade stocks, which I don't recommend, and other things like that, it's just language. Like it's just using text to call different tools to be able to run commands on a terminal or whatever, like Claude Code does. It's all language at the end of the day. The language gives you so much. Modeling the next word can enable all these things. I sometimes forget when interacting with these agents. It's just next word prediction at the end of the day. You get caught up in the magic of it. So,
have you toyed around with the OpenClaw at all?
No, I haven't done that.
But it sounds like you've been in Claude Code a little bit.
Yeah.
I got to toy around with some vibe coding. I vibe coded an app. It will plan your meals for you and generate recipes. Cool. I'm actually pretty proud of it. It's an app idea that I had a long time ago that I was like, I will never build this. Getting into that, toying around with Claude Code and learning what vibe coding is makes me think that we will always need technical roles.
Oh, wait, what makes you say that?
Because of how tricky it was to set up all the API endpoints.
Okay.
And the other thing is being an art director. Brandon Sanderson said something smart about AI. Can a person who uses AI to write a book call themselves an author? Was the question that Sanderson got asked. And his response, he said, I will commission art for my books from artists. And it's a collaborative approach. I talk to them. It looks a little different like this. I'm paraphrasing here. But like I become an art director at best, and like maybe an art patron at the lowest level, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he said, but there still is some piece there where I am having this creative input into the process, but I'm definitely not an artist. I could never call myself an artist. And
it's so like a curator at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Like you absolutely have influence. You absolutely provide direction, provide input, provide taste, but you are not an author or an artist. But here's the thing. If you want to be a good art director, like my sister-in-law works as an illustrator for big animation studios.
Oh, cool.
And she has art directors on these projects, keeping the project cohesive. They're providing feedback, and it's specific, actionable. And that art director is always an artist because they have the requisite skills to speak the language and make educated decisions. And if you don't speak the same language as the person producing the things, then you can't be as effective of a director.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah. So the point coming back around to being like, I think we will always need people able to think programmatically, understand what code is and why you use different solutions for different purposes.
Yeah.
And those people are going to still be needed, even if there's less raw code output.
No, I think that's true. I have a little thing in my Notion because I was wondering this would be something interesting to talk about the future predictions about LLMs and like where things are going to go in terms of
These
jobs.
are your predictions.
They're informed by other people, but
Yeah.
Another video that is good is Veritasium talks about what it takes to be an expert. And the problem is that experts actually are worse than random at making certain predictions. It's because in order to get better at something, you need actual feedback. You need a feedback mechanism. So if you're making a prediction about some unlikely event, how often are you going to be able to actually predict this thing? So there's a really good video that if you want to see more of this, they address this more, but it's should we all just become carpenters now or something? And it's directed more towards like software engineers, whereas yeah, I guess maybe I'll just be a carpenter instead. But they talked about it and they talked about how that they tend right now what's actually happening is a lot of junior software roles are not being hired for. And that could because it's because it's a recession or whatever. It could also be that you just have a senior engineer managing different AI agents and then they're doing the junior work. So
it's definitely that.
The big concern is in the long run, what's going to end up happening when there are no more junior, because to get a senior engineer, you have to have a junior engineer who suffers and who writes terrible code. And then eventually they get better by learning from their mistakes. You interact, you learn from your mistake, you see when you did something wrong and you get the feedback and you keep going and you get better and better. If essentially no more hiring of junior software engineers is going on, then we have 20 years of just like senior engineers left and then they're gone.
Where are the seniors going to come from?
So that's the issue. I guess the idea is in Silicon Valley, they're just like, oh yeah, maybe we'll just, the LMs right now are junior engineer level, but maybe we'll get to that senior engineer level. So we won't even need to worry about that then. We'll innovate our way out of it.
I think that is the promise that like Altman and others are selling the industry, and anybody who's like tightly invested into LLMs and like the future, if they're like heavily betting on the future of AIs, are going to be able to take over this part of the workforce. I think that they need to look at what happened with the parameter explosion between ChatGPT 4 and 5. Because the parameters, like ChatGPT 3 was cool. And it was like, whoa, look at this thing that can write pretty well. It can do okay. And then when they released 4, they expanded the parameter set from a few billion to like 3 or 4 trillion. I can't remember the exact numbers. And it was this amazing leap in performance. And all of a sudden, that was when I had the moment of, whoa, this is serious. This is real. This is world changing. And then suddenly it could start doing, they didn't mean to make it be able to translate languages, but suddenly it could speak French and Spanish fluently.
Yeah.
It started solving these other problems. It started getting better at math and reasoning. They believed it was still bad at some things, but there was this assumption that if we just get more parameters, it will be better and it will solve all of our problems. And they continued adding parameters and it didn't make a big difference.
Yeah.
There is a diminishing return
in terms of the scaling thing.
And so then they got into the multi-model stuff and the council of models, which is what ChatGPT 5 became. Like it's just 8 LLMs wearing a trench coat.
I think 5 was more just let's stop burning the tokens on the expensive models. And so 5 essentially has a model that will decide. So it's just a bunch of models working together. The model decides which model to hand off your question to. So if you just are writing more of a coding question, it'll hand it to the more precise model that's more coding oriented and so on.
But my point is that there will be architectural decisions that can be made to improve it. But I think that people might be betting on a like LLM future that might not exist. And we need to think about what that looks like in a business standpoint.
Yeah. That's ultimately like my future prediction. And it's not just me, but this is just experts who have lived through an experience where there was like that AI winter where it comes in cycles. There was like a decade or more where there just wasn't much interest in AI. It got overhyped earlier on. I think this was in the 80s.
Whoa, interesting.
Yeah, and it just ended up popping. And don't quote me on it being exactly the 80s, but there was this AI winter that happened before. And I feel like I went to a conference in Chicago, an AI conference there, and there were all these researchers getting up and this was like a year ago, and they said the topic was like, it was basically like everyone was just saying, yeah, when this bubble pops, we got to make sure that we can get like funding in another way. Like they were just very prepared for this hype to just go away or to be seriously deflated. And so it's like there wasn't even a question of, is this going to pop? The question is just like, when is this going to pop? When is the hype going to die down? And so I think that no matter what, it probably won't be the same kind of thing as like the .com crash, but it just seems like a lot of things are just like pretty similar to that in terms of OpenAI shutting down Sora just barely too. That's like another big one where it's how are you making money from that?
They burn so much money on Sora.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Video generation is so expensive.
So this is what Cal Newport said. Cal Newport in an interview with Hank Green recently. Did you see that video?
I don't know if I saw that one specifically, but I've heard Cal Newport talk about this.
Yeah, and I'm sure he was just spitting the same stuff he's sending out in other channels. I just happen to see him through Hank Green because that's my I love Mr. Hank.
I do too. I love some Hank Green.
But Cal Newport pointed out how he described this future like right now, all of these major AI companies. It's interesting because a lot of the people that I do business with every day, these venture capitalists and these people, they have a lot of money tied up and betting on this kind of general intelligence future where one model is going to do everything. It was fascinating to hear Cal Newport say that he doesn't think it's going to go to this one AI platform does everything. He thinks it's going to go down to lots of specialized little models that work hand in hand with human-built algorithms. And he gave the example of an LLM that is used as an interface for a machine that will play a game with you, like a turn-based strategy game. And so the LLM is how it interfaces with the social component of this turn-based game. It needs to be able to bluff and interact with other players and make logical arguments for why you should help it instead of your opponent, right? But all of the decision-making that was fed into that LLM came from rigorous prediction algorithm that was like, here's all the possible outcomes of all of these different steps. And then it allowed the LLM to use those as inputs to reduce hallucinations. Which to me just makes so much sense. Like having tightly specialized small models that are really good at individual little things instead of having this one huge artificial intelligence that replaces workers everywhere.
Like model combinations. I remember him talking about that, Cal Newport. And the guy he was talking about was at the conference in Chicago. Basically solved poker using machine learning stuff and statistics. He's able to make these bots. They were able to do better than humans and be able to win. Another one, like a strategy kind of bot. So with predictions, how often is Cal making predictions about this specific area and getting feedback on it? I think the future is fundamentally a little bit chaotic. I think it's really hard to predict how things are going to go. My intuition tells me we are going to integrate these models. We already have been. We fine-tune a model to read radiology T scans and it's able to identify stuff and talk physicians through how the CT scans are working. Yeah, we already have stuff like that. But in the background, we're using a general model. We're taking a general model that already exists because when you do have this general model, it turns out when you're using any information, any data, even if it's not directly related, it just makes the model better. So in a lot of cases, and then you can fine tune on top of that. So I think that the fact that these work so generally makes me think that I don't think we're going to use really specialized models for everything. Like these models only do so much. So we have to augment them with something else. Like for example, a model still needs a goal to be able to write the code. You had to work with it to do it. Yeah, the model's like you could say, oh yeah, the model's not just doing everything by itself because you're there like directing and organizing things and stuff like that. And that's true. And if that's what Cal Newport's saying is that, yeah, you're going to have a model that does one thing and people are going to use other tools to do other stuff. Like, sure, like that's already happening. That's literally how they work. But I just to think that these models are just going to get hyper specialized and that just is going to make them run better. I just don't think that's how it's going to go.
I think what he was referring to was lighter LLM models like DeepSeek. You know, things like, that are trained on a smaller but more specific set of parameters. They're still going to be
for sure.
But yeah, I don't know. That was just him. I'll have to send you the video afterwards. Interesting though that you, as somebody who understands machine learning as more than just LLMs, still believes in a primarily LLM future is what that sounded like.
It just depends. Because like, are LLMs going to replace... Because the really specific situation that Cal's talking about, where you have an LLM working, which is like a more traditional model, we already are doing that. And I don't know. A lot of times that's how RAG works by using a BERT model in the background. And it just passes. So you have models working.
Model? I'm actually curious. I'm unfamiliar with that phrase.
Yeah. So I guess the original attention is all you need paper. They had an encoder and a decoder. And essentially, they were using that to translate between English and German or English and French. They found out that you could take those two components, rip the encoder part off, and that's what became GPT. It was autoregressive. Autoregressive means you pass in one token and then you pass all that back in, and the model makes another step based off of that. So it keeps doing that over and over again until it reaches a stop token and then it stops. So there's the encoder and then the decoder part. Essentially, they'd use only half the model. And then the other half became like the BERT models. So essentially they split the original transformers into two. They used one that became like LLMs, and the other one became like the BERT style model. And the BERT model just takes text, encodes it into a high dimensional space. And then you can make a prediction off of that. So you can attach a neural network to that and then make a binary prediction at the end. So these BERT style models have actually not gotten as much attention as the large language models. They're still large language models. So yeah.
Is that so? My understanding, like I come from a place in doing like search engine optimization where we work on semantic similarity a lot. Work with vectorized text spaces. Is that so? The BERT models create the vector spaces.
Yeah, they're what create the vector spaces, and all the BERT models do when they're used in RAG, so retrieval augmented generation. And this is a way to make the LLM be more predictable, to get rid of hallucinations, which, by the way, one of my predictions is LLMs will always hallucinate no matter what we do. Like, you can't solve that problem currently with like the information.
I can totally get behind that.
I don't think we're going to replace like the senior experts because the LLMs are still going to be hallucinating. And there's one other thing I want to show you that the LLMs, like that recently came out, that shows that LLMs just struggle with things that humans can do pretty easily.
Yeah.
But I forgot, I got lost in the sauce. Where were we going with this?
RAG and BERT models for retrieval generation.
So yeah, the RAG models essentially take in stuff, find context that would be relevant based on the high dimensional space, bring in relevant information, and then spit that context into the traditional, GPT kind of model, and then it will use that context to constrain it.
Yeah.
But that's essentially all that RAG does, is it's just using these BERT style models.
What's so funny is that in my industry, so coming from search engine optimization, SEO for Google, people are freaking out because people aren't using Google anymore. They're going to ChatGPT. There was like 1 billion searches done on ChatGPT last year, and people are only seeing the AI overviews. And what I think is really funny is that people are saying SEO is dead. You need to be doing, and nobody has settled on a term for it yet. They're like AEO, which is answer engine optimization, or GEO, which is generative engine optimization. I just like AI search. That's the most intuitive to me, because geolocation, that's already a thing. And AEO is, I don't know, it's weird. To me, it still is a search engine technically, right? Like you're still, just because the technology is different.
Doesn't it, like when I'm typing in ChatGPT or something like that, and I'm just like, hey, I'm wondering about like where this conference is going to be, because Google's just so bad, even Googling it doesn't work that good. Then doesn't the model just go onto Google and search or whatever, and then pull that into its context? I'm pretty sure that's what it's doing. If the model's still using the SEO, but maybe like for advertisers in a way it's dead because the humans aren't the ones that are searching anymore. But it's just
so funny. You nailed it, because every time you put in a search into ChatGPT and it needs to do retrieval augmented generation, you can see it in the JSON markup in the fetch in the console. 8 to 12 fan out queries is what they're called, that are literally just Google searches that are relevant to your question. And then it goes and scrapes those results. And then I just learned about the BERT model part of this, where it would vectorize that text and then give you a response.
That's good that getting that confirmation, that's exactly what it's doing. So SEO is not dead. And I think what might happen is, this happened with radiology, where right now there's like a shortage in radiologists, and they're the ones who work with T-scans, imaging, whatever, because people had this scare in the past. There were these models called convolutional neural networks that were really good at processing images. So right now, LLMs are really good at text stuff. Before these apps, we had long short-term memory, and that's how Google did translate. But these ones are way more efficient. But back in the day, the convolutional neural networks were really efficient with images. So a bunch of doctors, when they were looking for where they were going to specialize, they're like, I shouldn't specialize in radiology because the field won't exist anymore. They're like, basically, there's only going to be one radiologist, so I can't go into radiology because there won't be a job there. And so nobody did. And so now there's just not very many radiologists. So the radiologists are getting paid like a ton more if you specialize in radiology, because there's not enough radiologists. So I think that people make predictions about what the future is exactly going to be like, and it ends up shaping things like in the opposite direction. So now there might be a ton of people running away from software, being like, oh, the end is nigh for all software jobs. I better never touch software again, or I better never be interested in writing or anything again. but things can overcorrect the other way as well. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, so make rational decisions based on what you think, but there's a chance that might not be true at all.
It's true. Yeah. And I seriously think exactly, I'm totally on board with you. That's such an interesting parallel to draw, because I just last year worked with a German firm providing software for radiologists. One of the major problems that they're addressing is radiologist burnout. And they are providing the AI tool that pre-diagnoses things that the radiologist is supposed to be working in tandem. Fascinating.
That's a huge area too. That's a part of my research as well, is that they have these tools that are essentially augmenting clinicians, and they create problems that people don't expect. And one of the main problems that these tools are creating, because I'm working on something right now to help infants in the NICU with genetic disorders get identified earlier. Whoa. So the model essentially takes their clinical notes and it makes predictions based off the clinical notes, like whether or not they're going to be sequenced by clinicians, and just essentially saying, hey, this infant has a high likelihood of being sequenced in the future. Could you take a look at them? But what ends up happening in situations like that we have to be aware of is that, sure, when these systems have been implemented in the past, like in the NICU, it increased the number of times that infants get sequenced and the doctors recommend the sequencing. Clinicians rely so heavily on the AI that they lose their discriminative capability to decide for themselves whether or not an infant should be sequenced. So they lose the ability to be doctors. They get worse at being a doctor because they're relying on the AI. Like I've gotten a little bit worse at writing from relying on AI.
I used to be able to knock out a high quality research article in 2 hours. It'd be like 45 minutes of familiarizing myself with the topic, 45 minutes of writing, 15 minutes of editing.
Yeah.
And it'd be like really excellent. And I was a great writer 4 years into using ChatGPT and now Claude. I tried to sit down and write an article the other day, and I couldn't do it.
It's cooked. It's over. Brain rot.
Skill. My brain has rotted. It's absolutely real. People aren't going into software right now because there's no software jobs. But I'm looking for a marketing director. The one criteria that I have for that position is I want them to hate AI slop. And I want them to be able to write better than the AI so that they can use AI to speed themselves up and then be better than the AI at writing so they can correct it. Yeah. Like hate it so much that you can use it effectively.
Yeah.
And that criteria, like if people stop majoring in English and literature, like we are going to lose something crucial. And instead of AI being the average writer, we are going to be at a point where LLMs are the only people who can write well.
It's the unfortunate, yeah. Especially now in school. I'm teaching a summer course, and like, how do you do school? I think that like flipped school structure matters like a lot more now than it ever did before. Like you need to be doing the homework in class where you're not using AI because you're actually working through the problems yourself. It just makes you dumber, I feel. If you don't actually have the experience of trying something and then getting feedback, then I just feel like you can't do it. And that's not to say that these are all just like bad all the time, because I feel like it can be one of the best learning tools. I think the best way to learn is to have a tutor there who is like an expert at it, and every time you do something wrong, gently corrects you or rewards you when you do something right. Guys are trained, is you have that instant feedback. If you have an LLM and you're learning something that's basic where there's a lot of information about it, you can trust the outputs of the LLM. So if you want to learn basic Python, there's so much of that on the internet. The LLMs have been trained on so much of that, so you can trust it. So I've been working on learning a little bit about video game development. And so in situations like that, it can actually be a really useful resource where it's, hey, I'm trying to do this. Don't tell me what to do. Just teach me. And then just that simple mindset shift when you're working with an LLM. If you're not struggling a little bit when you're writing and stuff like that, and you're just being passive, then you're not learning. So I feel like you can use them to learn, but you just have to do it consciously.
I have multiple times now. I have gone, when I've wanted to learn something new, I go to Claude and I say, hey, make me a curriculum. Because it's one of the core like benefits of having like going to university. One of the core benefits really is that you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And
this paradox.
Yeah. And so I just realized that I totally just mixed up.
You don't know what you don't know?
Sorry. You don't know what you don't know. And so the curriculum, having an AI generate a curriculum for you covers that base, right? Which before was restricted to textbooks and universities, and you had to pay for courses and things to get that structure to find the things that you don't know. Because yes, you can be self-taught in that you can look up YouTube videos for anything. If you don't know what you don't know, you can't look up the YouTube video to solve that gap.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I feel like that's going to be way more of a thing in terms of learning. I think it'd be nice if there was a way to constrain models where This should be possible. I think this is going to happen when you're talking about these specialized ones. There's this human feedback like thing that happens after the general model's been trained, and that's what makes it into an agent instead of a text predictor. It makes it into someone who's trying to help you do stuff. That human reinforcement step determines the character of the model. I think if we just change that a little bit when it comes to education, where it's like we don't reward it for telling kids the answer, instead we reward it for teaching them, and we have a criteria so that we can provide feedback to these LLMs, then you could have a really good education LLM providing feedback to people. So business idea, there you go. Start that. Someone do that, you make a lot of money if you can just do that quickly. And
I think we are going to need to revamp education in the face of the AI era.
Yeah, that's true.
For multiple reasons. One, because working with AI is going to be so different. But two, because AI is going to be a massive crutch and potentially cause massive atrophying of basic information skills. And then thirdly, because there's going to be unique opportunities that are presented in how we can learn now, like you just described.
I have questions that I want to discuss with you at some point as well. An interesting thing I think would be fun to talk about some other time is talking about people being socially blunted by AI, where you just end up interacting with AI who tends to be a little bit more sycophantic. And there's people who have the AI psychosis or whatever going on. I'm curious about in the future what your thoughts are about that, whether or not that is a bad thing, and what the level of interaction kids should have with these LLMs in terms of friendships. I'd be curious to talk about that some other time, because that's where it gets a little bit more philosophical. When the technology and the philosophy intersect, I am just very pleased. Yeah, we should have a discussion like that.
We should do a few AI episodes where we just chat about this, because there is a lot to it.
Yeah.
My kid is not going to be allowed to touch AI till he's at least 13.
Yeah.
And only with supervision after that.
Yeah. And even me, I think something that is actually really harmful is recommendation algorithms. Is just where you don't get to decide what you watch, you don't get to decide what you do. That lack of decision, when we're talking about atrophy, if you're not the one deciding where things are going, you're just giving that up to someone else. We don't have the social antibodies to deal with that at this point. I feel like that's number one thing is if you want to use YouTube, you can only look at your subscriptions. If you're going to use Instagram, you can only look at your friends' posts. There should be some kind of law that makes it so that that is an option for everyone, because I don't want to be recommended stuff. Like on Instagram right now, every time I open up to search something, it's always showing this little worm guy to me now. I don't know what this is, but the whole feed is filled up with this creepy worm guy. And I'm just like, what is going on? Why is he always recommending this to me?
It's the sad truth that every time that Facebook and Instagram have given us options between a curated feed delivering content to us, we have always chosen the automatic, no thought required version, which is too bad. Go ahead.
No, it's just so easy to do it that way. Like it's so close to us all the time. And the same thing happens with sports betting too, where it's so close to you all the time, it's hard to avoid it. So you have something that's really addictive and you're just somehow supposed to just not look at it, not be interested. It's terrifying.
It's mechanically designed to be the thing that is the most hard to look away from.
But it's awesome and I love it. So you can live in both worlds.
I don't know if I love it. I'm getting to that point where I don't know. Do you want to wrap up here? What books have you been reading / do you recommend?
In terms of like LLMs and AI stuff, I haven't really been reading a whole bunch of them.
This is just from the desk of Tyson Wheelwright, PhD.
The one I'm reading right now, it's a book called A Little Life. It's really long. It's probably really boring for a lot of people, but some of the details that this author just like writes are just so real and so good and so insightful that the whole time I've just been like listening to it, because audiobook, that's just what I do. The whole time I've been listening to it, I've just been like solemnly, and it's been like a solemn, almost spiritual kind of experience. So I'd recommend audiobook, A Little Life. Really good.
That will go on my recommendations list. I cannot wait to do this again with you next month. It was great talking to you.
Happy to be here.
All right, take care.